Iliad, Book 24. Argument. The redemption of the body of Hector. The gods deliberate about the redemption of Hector's body. Jupiter sends Thetis to Achilles to dispose him for the restoring of it, and Iris to Priam to encourage him to go in person and treat for it. The old king, notwithstanding the remonstrances of his queen, makes ready for the journey, to which he is encouraged by an omen from Jupiter. He sets forth in his chariot with a wagon loaded with presents, under the charge of Idaeus the herald. Mercury descends in the shape of a young man and conducts him to the pavilion of Achilles. Their conversation on the way. Priam finds Achilles at his table, casts himself at his feet, and begs for the body of his son. Achilles, moved with compassion, grants his request, detains him one night in his tent, and the next morning sends him home with the body. The Trojans run out to meet him. The lamentations of Andromache, Hecuba, and Helen, with the solemnities of the funeral. The time of 12 days is employed in this book, while the body of Hector lies in the tent of Achilles, and as many more as are spent in the truce allowed for his interment. The scene is partly in Achilles' camp and partly in Troy. Now, from the finished games, the Grecian bands seek their black ships and clear the crowded strand. All stretched at ease the genial banquet share, and pleasing slumbers quiet all their care. Not so Achilles. He, to grief resigned, his friend's dear image present to mind, takes his sad couch, more unobserved to weep, nor tastes the gifts of all composing sleep. Restless, he rolled around his weary bed, and all his soul on Patroclus fed. The form so pleasing and the heart so kind, that youthful vigor and that manly mind, what toils they shared, what martial works they wrought, what seas they measured, and what fields they fought, all passed before him in remembrance dear. Thought follows thought, and tear succeeds to tear. And now supine, now prone, the hero lay, now shifts his side, impatient for the day. Then, starting up, disconsolate he goes wide on the lonely beach to vent his woes. There, as the solitary mourner raves, the ruddy morning rises o'er the waves. Soon as it rose, his furious steeds he joined. The chariot flies, and Hector trails behind. Now thrice, Patroclus, round thy monument was Hector dragged, then hurried to the tent. There sleep at last o'ercomes the hero's eyes, while foul in dust the unhonored carcass lies, but not deserted by the pitying skies. For Phoebus watched it with superior care, preserved from gaping wounds and tainting air, and ignominious as it swept the field, spread o'er the sacred course his golden shield. All heaven was moved, and Hermes willed to go by stealth to snatch him from the insulting foe. But Neptune this, and Pallas this denies, and the unrelenting empress of the skies. Ere since that day implacable to Troy, what time young Paris, simple shepherd boy, won by destructive lust, reward obscene, their charms rejected for the Cyprian queen. But when the 10th celestial morning broke, to heaven assembled, thus Apollo spoke. Unpitying powers, how oft each holy fane has Hector tinged with blood of victims slain, and can ye still his cold remains pursue? Still grudge his body to the Trojans' view? Deny to consort, mother, son, and sire the last sad honors of a funeral fire? Is then the dire Achilles all your care, that iron heart inflexibly severe, a lion, not a man who slaughters wide, in strength of rage and impotence of pride, who hastes to murder with a savage joy, invades around and breathes but to destroy? Shame is not of his soul, nor understood the greatest evil and the greatest good. Still, for one loss he rages unresigned, repugnant to the lot of all mankind. To lose a friend, a brother, or a son, heaven dooms each mortal, and its will is done. A while they sorrow, then dismiss their care. Fate gives the wound, and man is born to bear. But this insatiate, this commission given by fate exceeds, and tempts the wrath of heaven. Lo, how his rage dishonest drags along Hector's dead earth, insensible of wrong. Brave though he be, yet by no reason awed, he violates the laws of man and God. If equal honors by the partial skies, and doomed both heroes, Juno thus replies, if Thetis' son must no distinction know, then hear ye gods, the patron of the bow. But Hector only boasts a mortal claim, his birth deriving from a mortal dame. Achilles, of your own ethereal race, springs from a goddess by a man's embrace. A goddess by ourself to Peleus given, a man divine, and chosen friend of heaven, to grace those nuptials. From the bright abode yourselves were present, where this minstrel god, well pleased to share the feast, amid the choir, stood proud to him, and tune his youthful lyre. Then thus the thunderer checks the imperial dame. Let not thy wrath the court of heaven inflame. Their merits nor their honours are the same. But mine and every god's peculiar grace Hector deserves of all the Trojan race. Still on our shrines his grateful offerings lay, the only honours men to gods can pay. Nor ever from our smoking altar cease the pure libation and the holy feast. Howe'er by stealth to snatch the corse away, we will not. Thetis guards it night and day. But haste, and summon to our courts above the azure queen. Let her persuasion move her furious son from Priam to receive the proffered ransom and the corse to leave. He added not. And Iris from the skies, swift as a whirlwind, on the message flies. Meteorus, the face of ocean sweeps, refulgent gliding o'er the sable deeps. Between where Samos wide his forest spreads, and rocky Imbrus lifts its pointed heads, down plunged the maid, the parted waves resound. She plunged and instant shot the dark profound. As bearing death in the fallacious bait, from the bent angle sinks the leaden weight. So passed the goddess through the closing wave, where Thetis sorrowed in her secret cave. There, placed amidst her melancholy train, the blue-haired sisters of the sacred main, pensive she sat, revolving fates to come, and wept her godlike son's approaching doom. Then thus the goddess of the painted bow, Arise, O Thetis, from thy seats below, 'tis Jove that calls. And why, the dame replies, calls Jove his Thetis to the hated skies? Sad object as I am for the heavenly sight, and may my sorrows ever shun the light. Howe'er, be heaven's almighty sire obeyed. She spake, and veiled her head in sable shade, which flowing long her graceful person clad, and forth she paced, majestically sad. Then through the world of waters they repair, the way fair Iris led to upper air. The deeps dividing o'er the coast they rise, and touch with momentary flight the skies. There in the lightning's blaze the sire they found, and all the gods in shining synod round. Thetis approached with anguish in her face, Minerva rising gave the mourner place. Even Juno sought her sorrows to console, and offered from her hand the nectar bowl. She tasted and resigned it. Then began the sacred sire of gods and mortal men. Thou comest, fair Thetis, but with grief o'ercast, maternal sorrows long, long to last. Suffice, we know and we partake thy cares, but yield to fate and hear what Jove declares. 9 days are past since all the court above in Hector's cause have moved the ear of Jove. 'Twas voted Hermes from his godlike foe by stealth should bear him, but we willed not so. We will thy son himself the corse restore, and to his conquest add this glory more. Then hie thee to him, and our mandate bear. Tell him he tempts the wrath of heaven too far. Nor let him more, our anger if he dread, vent his mad vengeance on the sacred dead. But yield to ransom in the father's prayer, the mournful father, Iris shall prepare with gifts to sue, and offer to his hands whate'er his honour asks or heart demands. His word the silver-footed queen attends, and from Olympus' snowy tops descends. Arrived, she heard the voice of loud lament, and echoing groans that shook the lofty tent. His friends prepare the victim and dispose repast unheeded, while he vents his woes. The goddess seats her by her pensive son. She pressed his hand, and tender thus begun. How long, unhappy, shall thy sorrows flow, and thy heart waste with life-consuming woe? Mindless of food or love, whose pleasing reign soothes weary life and softens human pain. O snatch the moments yet within thy power, not long to live, indulge the amorous hour. Lo, Jove himself, for Jove's command I bear, forbids to tempt the wrath of heaven too far. No longer then, his fury if thou dread, detain the relics of great Hector dead. nor vent on senseless earth thy vengeance vain, but yield to ransom and restore the slain.